Hello everyone, my name is Christian Castro and I'm going to be showing you all a project that I've been working on this quarter. And this project is under the LAEP program under the supervision of Franz Kurfess, where we're trying to build a web application that will utilize the power of AI to build a chatbot assistant to help students in a variety of different ways. Okay, yeah, so now let's go over the tech stack that I'm using for this project. I'm using the MERN stack, which is MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js. And so let's go piece by piece. So on the front end, I am using React and TypeScript. And I'm also using Redux for my global state management. I'm also using client-side routing with React Router and two third-party UI component libraries, which are ShadCN UI and Eternity. Eternity is actually how I got this sign up interface right here, which is really cool in my opinion. For the styling and CSS, I'm using Tailwind CSS and a couple of CSS modules for some components. Backend, Node.js and Express, but we're also using the OpenAI API. Most notably, we're using assistants. That way we can have access to the functionality of threads. And threads are just ways that we can keep context of chat messages. So every chat log will know your previous history. So you can continue chats and not everything's always new. We're also streaming the output, which is really cool. We're storing all these chat logs in the MongoDB database. And we're also using GitHub, obviously, right? And just ESLint and Prettier, just to make sure that everything's using best practices. Okay, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and walk through what we have for this current web app. And so when a user enters the website, they'll automatically be prompted to sign up or log in. So let's go ahead and just log in. We can log in using an email and password, or we can just go ahead and log in using Google. So I'm gonna do that part. And so I'll just go ahead and log in. I'll hide that. And now I'm about to be signed in. So here's a previous chat log that I was working on. Let's go ahead and just create a new chat. I'll be very similar just because it'll help the explanation. And so I said, hello, my name is Christian. Can you tell me a story using my name? And so I'll just go ahead and ask that message. What's happening right now is that the text message is being streamed out, but it's also being styled using Tailwind. So how it works is when I send a message, I also make sure to pre-prompt it, right? The user doesn't have to prompt it in any way. I go ahead and make sure the system knows to send this response in markdown format. And so what the markdown format will do is there's a library where I can convert the markdown text into HTML, which can then just be styled using Tailwind CSS. So I thought that was really cool and interesting, and it was a really big help. We're also using the assistant API. I mentioned that in the beginning with threads. So if I say, what is my name? It will have context to my previous message. And so now I'm just gonna wait. My name is Christian, right? So I thought that part was really also really cool. And yeah, that's pretty much for the chat interface. Next, I'll go ahead and show you how I'm storing it in the MongoDB database. And before I show you all where it's being stored in MongoDB, let me actually go ahead and just show the chat log. So in the chat log, it's automatically creating a title. So from the first message, it'll grab that message and it will try to create the title and then just insert it automatically for the user, as well as the date and time it was created. And you can also delete it if you choose to do so. And so now let's go ahead and just take a look at the MongoDB database. Here's the message right here. I had to go ahead and find it, but notice that it has the same title. It has my user ID. This is the user that created the chat log or sent the first message, right? And so here's the content, which is just all the messages that we have in the current chat log. So we have 4 messages, 2 are from me, 2 are from the bot. I said, hello, my name is Christian. Can you tell me a story using my name? And they send me this large story in markdown format, as you can see. And yeah, that's pretty much it. However, let me go ahead and show you guys the what happens when I create a new chat. So here's the terminal. This is just being outputted on the server side. So when I create, or when I go up and I send I have this chat ID, right? Same chat ID here. It's gonna go ahead and search if there is a current thread in our database in this collection right here. right? And so because this is the first message and there's no previous context, it'll go ahead and use the OpenAI API to create a new thread that will store the next messages on that. So every chat ID is associated with a unique thread ID. I want to make them a single ID, but because I have to use the OpenAI API, I was forced to do this where I have to have two other IDs, but they are connected in a single collection. And so I created the new thread ID, and so the stream is not completed. And so when I send a new message, let's go ahead right here. So I have this chat ID, and this is the same chat log. And so I look for the thread ID. I find it because I just created it, and now I'm able to use the previous context for that message. So that's how I implemented the Assistant API with the thread, with threads to enable context. And in the future, we plan on using the function calling to create different functions where our assistant will use these functions to do a variety of tasks that I will go into later in the video. But yeah, that was pretty much it for the MongoDB storage. I mean, we're also storing users. So here's the Firebase user ID and the first name and last name. There's no need to store passwords because Firebase takes care of all the authorization for us. And for the GPTs, I will get into that later in the video. Okay, so I would now like to just go over another feature, maybe using this how a student would. So with the different models that we have. So let's go ahead and just say, I want to create a senior project, or I need help creating a senior project. So give me senior project ideas regarding AI. So I send this, and they'll go ahead and give me a list of senior project ideas, and we'll go ahead and try to pick one. In the meantime, let's go ahead and talk about the different models that we have. So this is just the normal mode. This would be good for any type of message. This is an ethical chatbot. This will be used to help create ethical considerations when dealing with a senior project or any maybe assignment. So let's go ahead and change to ethical mode. Sorry, that was a little bit weird. I think that was from OBS, but yeah, let's go ahead and just pick one. Let's say we want to do an AI personal assistant. So I say senior project idea, please give ethical assistance. And so this will just provide me with ethical considerations to keep in mind when I'm creating this type of senior project. This model is pre-prompted and prompt engineered to be a helpful assistant and come up with unique ethical considerations that students should keep in mind when they're implementing their senior project. And so that idea of creating different assistants is really helpful. And so if I want to just view more assistants, I can go here and I can even create a new assistant. Here's the actual chat interface. This could definitely look better. We could definitely style it better, but the functionality is all there. So if I go ahead and just, I'll create a minor one just to show you guys proof that this is working. So I'll create all caps assistant. We won't attach a URL photo, but we'll just say messages sent in all caps. And I'll say no matter what, always send messages in all caps. For every message, make sure it is sent uppercase letters and avoid sending lowercase. So yeah, it's just gonna send every message with all uppercase. So if I just go ahead and go here, I can now see it. So let's go ahead and just say hello. Will automatically just send my message in all caps. Obviously, this isn't the most helpful assistant, but it gets the point across on how you can instruct or pre-prompt and prompt engineer when you're creating the assistant to give responses how you want to. So here's my professor, Professor Kurfess, or not my professor, but my advisor, Francis Kurfess. I just made him a little assistant, his own assistant, and my goal is to maybe have different teachers at Cal Poly use this to help students with their assignments or senior projects. Maybe we can create an assistant that can help a student register and know what classes to take. I think that could be very helpful, or how to sign up for independent study or senior projects. That can also be really helpful. Even how to attend office hours for some professors, giving Zoom links or appointment links. Stuff like that can be very beneficial, and that's why this feature to create your own assistant can be very beneficial. And so also, before I forget, let's go ahead and show you guys the collection or the schema for these assistants. And so right here, I did just make one, the all caps assistant. It has a description, doesn't have a URL photo, but here are all the other assistants that we have. So these will all be displayed onto the display. And so here's the assistant ID, and this was the assistant ID corresponding to the OpenAI API. So when I did create the assistant, I had to go ahead and use the API that OpenAI offers to go ahead and create this new assistant on their server. And so I did it. I returned an assistant ID, and so now I can use this in my project as well. And so yeah, that's pretty much the entire functionality of how assistants work in this application. Okay, now I'll just show some small features that we have. So we have the ability to go ahead and delete schedules, right? So let's go ahead and just delete maybe the first one or all of them, right? If we don't need them. We have the ability to easily sign out right here. I'm given the name and the photo from when a user signs in using Google, so I'm just automatically displaying that. I don't have to ask for that. And then here's the text area. It automatically will expand. So I think that's nice. And just the text area, the header that contains the sidebars right here. Users can go in and out, and the entire chat interface will move, including the text area and the chat container right here. We also have the new chat. We can create as many new chats as we want, but none of it will actually be stored in the database until the user sends the first message. And then now this will be head and stored in our MongoDB database. Oh, and we also have the Franz Kurfess bot. I forgot to send that a message. But yeah, here's the information. Okay, so now I'll just be going over the part that I'm very proud about. Maybe not the most fun and exciting, but I went ahead and created documentation, really in-depth documentation going over every feature in this application. And that's because I won't be working on this project over summer. However, new students will be onboarded onto this project. And so I wanted to just go ahead and showcase what I've done so far and the features I've implemented. So in here, I have, in the README, I have a description of what the application is, but I also have the installation process. From previous students, I heard that the installation was pretty well done. I tried to make my own scripts in the package.json that would make installing the client and server dependencies a lot easier, as well as just running the application. And so yeah, here's the documentation just to install it, but the actual documentation that goes over all the features is right here. So I have a table of contents, just the project introduction, the getting started with the prereqs. And so let's actually go to and change branches because I did edit it a little bit. So right here, we have the getting started, which will go over all the prereqs, which is just the knowledge that students should try to learn in the beginning when they're starting. And yeah, here's the table of contents. Just go ahead and go through really quick. I won't go through all of it because that would take forever. Notice how the scroll bar is very tiny. There's a lot of written information in here, but we'll just do a quick scroll and skim over most of the content. So here's the overview. It's under the supervision of Franz Kurfess, under the computer science department at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It's an open source repo. Obviously you guys can see it right now, but its purpose is just to aid students with their senior projects. It's using AI with the help of OpenAI's API to just streamline the process of assisting students with their senior project, but also help them with their entire overall experience. And one feature that we want to work on is creating an assistant that will go ahead and call a function that will match students with advisors for their senior project. That's something that we're in the working of, and the new students are going to try to work on that over summer. So I just go over project goals. I'll probably come back to that at the end, but let's just skip over that for now. The prereqs, just including documentation and links that will help them. Any YouTube videos that I find helpful, I attached in here. This is just the project structure. I try to do my best to maintain a clean folder structure. I take pride in creating code that's maintainable and that can scale easily. And that makes sense, at least to me, and hopefully other students as well, or developers. But in here, in my client, I'm using React, obviously, so I'm gonna have a source, and I attached most of my components in here, and I sorted them by chat. You have chat log, the logs you saw on the sidebar. The custom GPTs, right, like the assistants that we have. Here's the layout, just includes the header, the footer. Same with the assistant header and footer or layout. And we also have sidebar, right? We have a register that contains the things that you saw when users are logging in or signing up. The security protected route, this just makes sure that no one can use the API on the front end unless they're signed in, and that's just to protect the route that way. And so we also have our pages component, and this is just containing the page component that will use the rest of these components in here. And this is just to structure it, just so like people know where the root of the main page is at. Where like if you register, here are all the components that use the register page, or if you're in the chat interface, here's all the components that use the chat interface. Here's the Redux. This was a really important part. I learned a lot about the Flux architecture in this part of the application. I was able to create 4 slices, the authorization slice, so I can get the user Firebase ID really quickly. I can get their photo really quickly. And for the messages, I can just get the type of model as well as the chat logs, or actually the log does a chat log, sorry about that. But these are pretty much all the slices. I have it in more depth. I can talk about it as you get down the documentation. I'm also using TypeScript on the front end, so I have all the types associated. These are all tied in with the Redux slice to make it a little bit easier, and to just make everything more consistent as well. And on the server side, I'm using Express Router to manage all my API endpoints. And so for every API endpoint, I usually have a collection for it. So here's all the chat logs. And so for the services, these are just the actual function that are being called in the routes. And they're just helper functions to get the data set up to interact with the MongoDB database. I feel like this is the best approach in case you wanted to shift approaches, like maybe choose a different database. We would still have the helper function that does most of the work, and all we would need to change is slight syntax for the collections. So I did that just to make sure that this code will be maintainable and other people could use it for their project if they're not using MongoDB exactly. This is helpers. So OpenAI does have an SDK that makes it pretty easy to use their API. However, I wanted to make it even easier, so I implemented more helper functions to create assistants, delete assistants, same with threads, create, delete threads, insert messages into threads, stuff like that. I feel like these helper functions just streamline the process, and it will help these onboarded students with it. And so yeah, that's pretty much the folder structure. That's the majority of the project explained in a brief recap. And I go into more depth here. I'll skip that. The front-end documentation, I'm using client-side routing with React Router. I just explain how to use it. I give steps on exactly what to do for that. Redux introduction, just giving a brief introduction on what Redux is and how it works as our global state management is really important. I think the most confusing part about it is probably either the reducers are difficult but not as hard as the async thunks, right? With the extra reducers, these are just reducers, but they are asynchronous. And so I try to do my best explaining that part. And then we also have just ways on how to implement this, right? So in an actual component, this is how I use it. I'm just grabbing my state variable like this. A cool thing about TypeScript is when I do state.log just that, and then it'll autocomplete, or it'll show me all the different state variables I have in the state.log, which is why I was using TypeScript, is just because I thought it would be easier for onboarding students to know exactly how to use these state variables and avoid prop drilling and all that messy stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much most of it. I'm going to try to go quicker because I don't want this video to be too long, but I go over how to dispatch actions, and let's just keep going down. I go over Redux a lot because I thought that that was really important, but let's try to skip that for now. My types, using TypeScript, I just go over every single type I have in the application and what it's going to be used for. I'll skip that for now. Actually, one thing I wish I implemented TypeScript on the server side and made these types on maybe my root folder and created all the types before, because when I was learning TypeScript and using it in this project application, I realized that I was changing a lot of types and maybe the variable names wouldn't be the same. I wish I had the type structure all in place beforehand, or at least had an approach on how I wanted to make these types, and just had that on the server side, being stored in the MongoDB database and then sent to the client side. I felt that that approach would be a lot better, and maybe use less types initially, and just reuse it. I still have a lot to learn in TypeScript. However, I have been enjoying the auto completion a lot. But I'm also using UI component libraries, which I love. I feel like that it helps me out a lot, especially because CSS is on my weaker side of front-end development. And I was also trying to mix and match CSS modules because not everyone knows Tailwind. So I try to do CSS modules towards the end. And I also implemented instructions on how to use it for the onboarding students. Most of the code is in the client side, that's why it was so long, but I do also have a good amount on the server side. Just expressing the API endpoints and how they work using Express Router. I also go in depth on the OpenAI API and how to create assistant using the helper function I implemented. How to use threads and what they are, and just integrating MongoDB with our helper functions that communicate directly with our MongoDB database. Like having these middleman helper functions, I feel like is really important because in case we want to change databases, like I mentioned before. And so there's a lot of benefits of this approach, which I think is worthwhile doing. And so database, also talk about the collection. I did show you guys that, so let's just skim past this. And then just a contribution guideline, the coding standards that we have using Prettier, how they can format the client, format the server. I even have down below how they can do both, but also just running lint on the client and server just to catch any small warning or error messages before the code is pushed to main. I learned this in my software to intro class, and I really enjoy using it. I feel that working in a team setting, this is a necessity. And so I also have how to contribute instructions. In case students aren't familiar with how to use Git, I wrote down everything you should do before making a change to the main branch, such as fetching from origin, making sure all your changes on your branches are updated, and then just pulling the recent changes from origin main, and just creating a new branch off main, right? You never want to make changes directly to main just in case you break it. And so you make the changes, you make sure to run lint, and you can just run lint all and format all, and that will format the code using Prettier for you, and it will also check for any errors or warnings on the code for both the client and the server side. These were just scripts I wrote in the root package.json to have this happen concurrently. And so yeah, they'll just commit changes, push changes to branch. They'll merge, in case the branch was alive for a while, I want them to also make sure to merge main back into their branch, just in case new changes were made that they weren't accounting for. To avoid merge conflicts, I feel like before merging the main, just making sure everything works correctly. So Yeah, here's pretty much all the other things. I also use squash and merge just to keep the commit history as simple as possible. And yeah, that's pretty much most of it. I also obviously want students to document their changes because I do hope that this project will be alive after I graduate and maybe after they graduate. So having new students work on this project can be really helpful. And they would obviously need documentation on how this project works. And so I just added some additional resources, things that help me a lot. I won't go into this into much detail, but that was pretty much the entire documentation that I had. I know it was very long, but my software engineer teacher said no documentation is too much documentation, so I really took that to heart and try to write as much as I can. Just because I won't be working on this during summer, but I do want these students to have a good understanding of how this project works. And so, quick recap. I did begin this project and the other projects I posted in the beginning of this quarter, and I've just been working relentlessly to try to finish it and try to do as much as I can. But I did really learn a lot this quarter on web development, and I really do feel like full stack development is for me, and I'm excited to continue to make web apps, and hopefully I keep growing and growing. And so I'm just posting these videos, and mainly for myself, just to see the progress I've grown from when I began. And so in the past year, I've learned a lot on computer science and software development as a whole. And so I'm really excited to see myself looking back on this video in a year from now and seeing how much more I know. And maybe looking at the code and being like, why did I write it that way? Stuff like that I think is going to be very interesting in a year or maybe 5 and 10 years. It's going to be really fun and enjoyable. And so that's why I'm posting this video. But if you made it this far, I do thank you for watching this entire thing or skipping to the end, whichever one. This took I spent a lot of time on these projects, and I'm really proud of what I've built so far. And hopefully the summer students will enjoy the documentation I built and will continue to work on this code. And for fall quarter, I do plan on working on this project because I do feel like I grew a lot with it. It taught me a lot of useful concepts, especially how to use Redux. And I do come to learn that Redux is hard to implement, but it's definitely worth it in the end when you have all your state easily managed and you can access it right away, and it's straightforward in that sense. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. And that was pretty much it. I do have 2 other projects on this account that I posted that I was working on this quarter, and I will attach the documentation as well as the GitHub repo to this project in the description below. But yeah, thank you.